Welcome back to the Obvious Choice Podcast. So happy that you're here with us. I'm here, as always, with Amber Reynolds and Ren Jones, i.e. MC Tuck Tuck. Today, we're talking about CrossFit, but not like whether CrossFit is good or bad, specifically like just some stuff that I've learned. So for context, CrossFit is kind of a topic that gets shit on a lot in the fitness industry, and I've always wondered why. Not that I knew a lot about it. The point is I didn't know a lot about it. And so I kind of didn't ever talk about it because I don't believe that you should ever talk about something you don't know or haven't experienced yourself. But it always seemed odd to me that there was this, call it discipline, there was this style of training, there were these kinds of workouts that was so popular, that is so popular. Whether people call it CrossFit or not, you can't argue that a lot of the CrossFit modalities and ways of training have found their way into a lot of other gyms and types of programs. And so whether they use the title or not, there's still a lot of CrossFit type training. And yet, at the same time as it being as popular as it is, you have this massive faction of the industry that thinks it's the biggest evil around. And whenever there's something like that where I have, call it one really smart friend over here that thinks one way, and then I have another really smart friend over here that thinks the exact opposite way, I find that fascinating. Because I want to learn why they both think those ways. Because there's clearly something good there. There's clearly something interesting there. And so I decided to do my own experiment with CrossFit. And today actually marked my 3-month point. So I decided that I was going to join a CrossFit box. I guess it's not called a gym. It's called a box. It's like the same kind of dumb shit as like Starbucks calls it a tall. It's like, it's a gym, call it a gym. But I get why they use their own language. And so I joined a CrossFit studio 3 months ago. And I've done 4 CrossFit classes a week for 3 months. And I kind of put together 7, call it learnings from that experience. So this isn't me saying CrossFit is good or bad. What I will say is that at the end of 3 months, I've decided that I'm going to continue on with CrossFit for a while. It's been fun. I love the people, and I've been happy with the results. And I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of it, kind of how I feel and why I've decided to continue on with it for a while. But what I wanted to share are just some thoughts. There's 7 of them on what I've learned from doing CrossFit. And I think it'll bring up a couple really good conversations between us as well that you can learn from, whether you're a CrossFit coach or not. I think you'll learn a lot from what they're doing, because even if you have your own opinions on what CrossFit is or isn't, you cannot doubt the impact that it's had on the industry, and you cannot doubt the business that they've built. I mean, think about it. If you own a gym or a studio or whatever, right, you'll know that it's hard to sell memberships, and you're competing against other gyms to sell memberships. And I know people in the city who struggle to sell memberships for $50 or $100, and they have all of this amazing equipment in their gym and machines and stuff like that. CrossFit is like, yo, here's an empty room. It's $300 a month. And people are jumping to join. So what's going on there?
Sorry, something fell on my desk.
Did you pick it up? Did you get it?
Yeah, it didn't fall onto my desk. Something that was on my desk fell. That's a better description, because there's no shit falling from the sky here in North Carolina that I'm aware of today.
You know how scary that would be, though?
Yeah. Well,
I think about that when I'm driving a lot of the time. Like, you could, you're kind of like protected and trained against stuff coming from the front or even behind you. But like, if something falls from above, you're screwed.
Generally speaking, as a planet, John, I think that's probably true.
So we spoke about how George Washington died a while ago on the podcast. Do you remember what it was, Amber?
Mm-mm.
We had a conversation about this a few months back. I don't know. I talked to a lot. I don't talk to many people. Yeah, it was here. You're the only people I talk to. So George Washington, President of the United States, George Washington, died. He was bloodletted to death. And that was just medicine at the time. Like, the leading doctors in the world bloodlet this guy, and he died. And we look back at that and we're like, how could they be so stupid And so I thought about that a while ago, and I was like, okay, well, what are future societies going to look back on our time and think about us? How could they be so stupid? The way that we look back at like bloodletting and say, how could they have been so stupid? Like, it's driving, man. It's driving, dude. You got two people going in opposite directions, separated by like 2 feet with no protection in between them, in these massive, hard to control vehicles, going 60, 70, whatever kilometers, miles an hour, distracted on their phone with their kids crying in the back, traveling in opposite directions towards one another.
And you only have to prove that you can do it once. And if you
Right.
don't drive for years, you don't get retested as long as your driver's license is still valid.
There's going to be somebody on a podcast 50 years from now that's going to look back and they're going to say, God, how could they be so stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Here are my thoughts on CrossFit.
Nice segue.
Smooth, John.
Number one, and this I think leads into the conversation well, 3 months doing something multiple times a week is the minimum amount of time to have any opinion on the thing. There are a lot of people who have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. From my perspective, if you have not done something and experienced it yourself for a minimum of 3 months, multiple times a week, you don't deserve an opinion. Now, if you're a researcher, maybe that's different. But be honest with yourself. Most of the stuff you talk about on the internet, you probably don't know a lot about. You certainly don't have a lot of personal experience about a thing. And this comes down to business stuff as well. You're like, hey, I was doing this thing in my business and it didn't work. You're like, oh, how long have you been doing it? They're like, a week. It's like, you don't know shit about fuck. Like, you just have no idea. You suck at whatever you're doing. Because no matter what you're doing, I don't care what it is. If you've been doing it for a week, you suck at it. I suck at stuff I've been doing for a week too. I suck at stuff after 3 months of doing CrossFit for 4 times a week. Workout last week was barbell snatches above the head. I got blisters on my hand in places where I shouldn't have blisters because I suck at it. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what happens. And so if you're working with a coach of any capacity, a business coach or whatever it is, or you decide that you're going to do something to better yourself or your business, maybe it's some sort of posting on social media, maybe it's some sort of in-person networking something, whatever it is that you decide to do, I say 3, I actually think probably 6 months, but like 3 months minimum with multiple activities a week doing that thing, or you have no idea whether it works or not. There's too much unpredictability. There's too much luck involved in everything that we do to know whether something works, aside from the fact that you're going to suck at that thing for a while anyway when you start it. And this goes into a bigger conversation that we keep getting back to, which is starting something new sucks. Mm-hmm. But rapidly testing to see how things feel is a good idea. Because my opinion is when you decide to do something, whether it's the best way to achieve that goal or whether it's the lowercase ge good enough way to achieve that goal, both of them are probably going to work well enough for you for whatever your desired output is, as long as you work at that thing and continually get better at it. And part of that is like feeling good about what you're doing. And so I believe that it's very important to rapidly test concepts. Like if you think that, oh, this is the best way to build my business. Okay, cool. Try it out. Try it out for a week. And your goal isn't to decide whether it works or it doesn't work, because you have no idea whether it's going to work or whether or not it's going to work. It's to answer 3 questions. It's, do I enjoy doing this? Do I think I could get good at doing this? And question number 3, if I continue doing this for a year, do I feel like I will be in a better place than I am today? if you can positively answer those 3 questions, close the book, and that's what you do for a minimum of 3 months, and you don't try anything else. Right? Because starting something new, whatever you're doing, sucks. It's going to be hard. It's going to take time. You're going to be bad at it. But once you get going with something, and once you build up momentum, and once you get good at it, and once it becomes a routine, it actually starts feeling almost like you're cheating because it starts being easy. So 3 months doing something multiple times a week is the minimum amount of time to have any opinion about something, about whether it's good, about whether it's bad, about whether it works. It's still not a lot, though. So as I go with the next 6 points, thoughts on CrossFit, keep that in mind. It's still not a lot. I've still only been doing this for 3 months. So I think it's enough time to be able to have an opinion justifiably. I don't think it's enough time to be any sort of an expert. So these are my personal reflections that I thought that were interesting. Number 2, CrossFit seems to me to require exceptional coaching. I'm not saying that this is necessarily different from other fitness modalities, but I've had a lot of coaches in a lot of different modalities. Can't say that I've done everything just yet, but I've done just about everything with coaches. And CrossFit seems to me to require the highest level of coaching for something that is for general population people. I mean, once you get to high performance athletics, yeah, obviously. But for something that's supposed to kind of be for everybody, it seems to need a really good coach. So Dave, so where I go, it's called Collective Fit. It's a studio in Toronto. Dave, who runs the facility I go to, is very, very good. He's in his 50s. He's been a trainer for 30 years. I expect that is very rare. I don't know if that's the case or not. This is the only CrossFit studio that I've been to. But I know personal training, and I know that there's not a lot of personal trainers who have been personal trainers for 30 years. And so the instruction, Dave's the instructor for all of the classes that I go to, and I think there might be one other instructor studio, but it's quite small. There's like 70 members. The instruction is exceptionally good. And he knows the stuff inside and out. And I mean, he doesn't I sometimes joke with him. I'm like, myofascial lines, eh? And he's like, yep, but he doesn't use those terms, but the stretching and stuff like that he's doing. I know what he's doing a lot of the time, and I buy it. I mean, he's a way better trainer and coach than I ever was, and that I'll ever will be, because he's still actively doing it and I'm not. So I've been very impressed with his coaching. But I can see how challenging, potentially dangerous, wrought with potential, I don't want to say danger, but areas where you need to be very careful, where if there is an inexperienced instructor, I would be nervous to send somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in fitness to CrossFit. So that was one of my reflections, is that I've loved the discipline, but I can see how important it is to have a really, really, really good coach. And they're out there, but I'm sure that there's lesser experienced coaches too, and that's not a bad thing. There's always lesser experienced coaches and stuff, but lesser experienced coaches probably need more supervision and oversight in CrossFit than they might in other types of training. I didn't put this, so I wrote a post on my Facebook, which I'm kind of reading from with these, and we're expanding on them. I didn't put this, but I'll add this in. Dave subscribes to a service. He uses an app called Watify, which is a popular app for CrossFit boxes. And he subscribes to a service from Jason Khalipa, who I've actually met a few times, really good guy, but like famous CrossFit guy. And Jason basically centralizes programming for a lot of different boxes. And so they integrate with Wodify, and you can subscribe. I think Dave said it was $200 a month, and you get all of the workouts for the year brought into your Wodify, and then Dave can individualize them. So for example, like he changed the workout a little bit today because the weather was nice. So changed the cardio to be running from indoor cardio stuff. We did a lot of running today. I think that that's the way that a lot of gyms should actually do. I think that a lot of gyms should actually centralize their programming. I think an instructor's job should be to deliver and support and direct a client. I don't think instructors in the gym should often build the workout. For a few reasons. Number one, I think workout programming is very much a mastery profession, especially if you're doing it for people long term. There's just a lot of nuance to it. Now, that's not to be said that I think that people can get good results on a lesser quality program, but I do think that it's very much a mastery profession at the same time. So I think it's very, very difficult, and I think it's something that you got to do for a long time to be good at. It's kind of like the game of poker where you can learn the rules in an evening, but then it's going to take you 10 or 15 years to become a master. And in that whole period in between, you're probably not going to get you're going to get like marginally better. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to hit a point where you hit that mastery asymptote where you start to really pull away from the pack. And so centralized programming, I think, is a very good idea for a lot of studios. The second is, so I'll tell a story. There's a hostage negotiator. Oh God, what was the book that he wrote? I didn't read the book, but I listened to a bunch of podcasts with him. Then I started to read the book, and I was like, yeah, this is all on the podcast, so I don't need to read the book. But it was a hostage negotiator who talks about listening and negotiation tactics. And really, really powerful stuff. But he talked about hostage negotiations. There are 4 people involved in a hostage negotiation. There is the person who's speaking to the criminal, terrorist, whatever. And then there are 3 people who are listening. One is listening to the words that are being said. One is listening to the intonation of the words. And one is listening to the body language. And they're all relaying signals to the person speaking. The person speaking is not in any way responsible for listening. There are 3 individual humans responsible for listening to 3 different pieces of feedback. That is how hard it is to listen well and coach well. I don't think that a coach can really coach well on the floor, like exceptionally well. I don't think that they can do it if they're thinking about their program at the same time. Anything to add on that before we move on to number 3?
No, I don't have anything. Well, I do have one thing. So that as you're talking about Dave and his coaching, shout out to you, Dave. Good job. As you're talking about
really
Dave,
he really is quite good.
Yeah, because you don't say that often, and I know you've had a lot of coaches, and they've been fine, but you're somewhat emphatic about the goodness of Dave's chocolatey goodness or vanilla goodness. I don't know what color.
He's a very white guy.
Okay, Dave's vanilla goodness. Dave's creamy vanilla goodness. What I think about is how often we overcomplicate programming and underserve the service of coaching. Like it's a really common thing that particularly new coaches, they want to do the expert level programming, and by default they miss all the communication skills and information that you can get from working with another human being in the actual coaching. And it sounds like Dave's really good at that, at the listening, reflecting, understanding, talking back, all of it.
And
all
part of that is knowing when to talk back and give people shit, and knowing when not to. But I think this goes down into the hostage negotiator example where it's just too much to do for one person.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are tasked with too much to do for one person, the default is to do the thing with the most immediate feedback or to do the thing that seems the most immediately obvious, which is always going to be the programming, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it?
Well, it's funny because we get a ton of pushback on that, right? Like in the Online Trainer Academy, where we're talking about there's only one perfect solution to a problem, right? And so you template that and then you make adjustments on a, case by case basis. But for the most part, there is a one perfect solution to a problem. But there's always, I want to make everything custom. So if we were to go to, a centralized, kind of programming, that would be interesting because there's so much pushback even with just their own templates, let alone outsourcing that.
Right.
I would have loved to have that. I hate programming. I love the interpersonal stuff and the problem solving with why you won't do the thing. That's what I love. I hate programming. That sucks. So if I could have outsourced that. And so for people that are like that, maybe that's the solution. There's some people that hate the interpersonal part, but that love the programming part. Find each other and work together.
Pair up
or
and
just separate the activities. Or separate the activities from one another.
Mm-hmm.
Good feedback on that one. Number 3, this one I'm going to try to explain it. When I was writing this out, I mean, I wrote this post fast. In all fairness, I could have written it way better than I did. But number 3 is every exerciser has a responsibility to self-modulate much more than other forms of coach training that I've been a part of. Now, group fitness as a whole, I think the exerciser has a responsibility to self-modulate, especially when there's something like centralized programming where the whole, call it class, is doing the same workout every day. But it seems like with CrossFit, maybe there isn't the machines. It's largely a lot of barbell work. And it's hard, right? Like there's a performance and there's a fitness side to every workout. The fitness side is generally easier or like taken back, right, than the performance. But the fitness side is hard, too. It seems like there is more of a need for the person exercising to be responsible and feel their own body more than other types of training. So there's a woman in our class, I celebrated her on my Instagram. She celebrated her 72nd birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in the class almost every day. I think she does 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week. Lisa. And she's awesome. But like, she doesn't even say anything to the instructor. Like, she's been going for a long time. She doesn't even say anything to Dave, right? She knows what she can do and what she can't do. And if there's something in the workout that she can't do, she does something that she can do. Doesn't make a big deal out of it. I don't even notice most of the time. I mean, most people don't notice. We're doing our own thing. But I don't know. That was just something that jumped out at me, where I even find myself doing it sometimes, where, for example, a couple of the workouts this week were 1 rep maxes. And so we're coming out of a phase where we're retesting our 1 rep max. And I'm like, I don't really give a shit what my 1 rep max is. It just doesn't matter to me. And so I'd like to actually get a little bit more work in. And so I just changed it a little bit. And instead of doing 1 rep for the last 3 sets of the whatever, the time that we were doing, I just did 3 sets of 3. And I took the weight back a bit. That's just what I did that day. So that just jumped out. I don't know if there's anything else to talk about that. I mean, I think that there's always a responsibility of the client, of the exerciser, to share what they are feeling and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. But it often isn't said, like it often isn't something that's stated and said, hey, like, this is the workout for today. What are you doing with it? Kind of.
Well, that's probably some of the rub for some people that do complain about CrossFit, right? Is like, for people that aren't naturally going to listen to their body, if they need to be told what to do every step of the way, and if they do the thing they were told to do and it fails or they get hurt, then they blame the wrong person, and so that might explain some of the backlash that CrossFit gets, is the people that aren't good at listening to their bodies and making adjustments.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff in there that like kipping. So kipping gets a lot of stuff. I just don't do the kipping stuff. Like, and that's fine. If the workout, so we did this workout a couple weeks ago, what was it? I think it was 30 pull-ups, 50 kettlebell swings, 20 pull-ups, 50 kettlebell swings, 10 pull-ups, 50 kettlebell swings. And so that's meant to be for kipping, right? Because 30 pull-ups is a lot of pull-ups to do in a row.
It's a lot of damn pull-ups.
It's a lot of damn pull-ups. But, I partitioned it, right? Like I did them strict and I just cut it into its own set. Because I don't think kipping is, maybe I'm wrong here and maybe I'm just not good at it, but I don't think kipping is particularly healthy for your shoulder joint over time. It tears the shit out of my hands, which I just don't like. I don't want to be walking around with like callous, bloody hands. More than they already are. And also like I'm not good at it, and it's not a skill that I see benefit in developing for my goals. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And probably some of that other stuff, the reasons why I say I don't do it or don't want to do it, probably would be solved if I got good at it. But like, why? Like I'm 37 years old. Like I want to be healthy and play with my kids and look good for my wife. Like, do I need to kip for that? No. So I don't need to take time learning that skill. And that's just a way for me to self-modulate based off of my own goals what I want to get out of this. What were you going to say, Glenn?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the ability to self-modulate also comes from the attitude and atmosphere that the coach provides. Because oftentimes in wellness generally, what we see is with the newly developed, highly imposter syndrome feeling coach, what they will do is they'll beat the dog shit out of every new client that they get in an attempt to prove the validity of their training expertise. So Dave, again, shout out to you vanilla wafer, Dave. You absolute creamy vanilla tall glass of man.
He's not that tall.
Can we redo that, but in a slow jam? Like,
no, we cannot.
We'll get
slow jam Dave.
When is gonna slow jam Dave at the end of this episode?
Sweet Jesus. Now I gotta pay attention.
No, 100%. Well, and I've seen, somebody new came in a couple weeks ago, and he did one session, and Dave, it was like a sample session stuff, and he said that he had done CrossFit before, so it's fine. And he didn't really do like there's kind of CrossFit and CrossFit. There's a lot of people who say that they're CrossFit style, and it's really like group exercise, and then there's the CrossFit kind of like what I'm doing, which is more kind of old school. Right, CrossFit, a lot of barbell stuff, a lot of that. And it was clear that this guy didn't know how to do any of those moves. And Dave just went to him afterwards and said, look, like, we would absolutely love to have you in the class, but I need to do a few privates with you before then, where we're teaching and going over some of these movements. Right? Let's move on so we don't run out of time. Number 4. This one is probably the most important point. It's not necessarily a learning. It's something that I've always kind of known. And when I say it, I feel like you'll probably know it too. But it's a reason why I think that training is really valuable. Here's how I wrote it. I said, I like that some days are hard and some days are fucking insanely hard. The hard days feel easy because of the insanely hard days. There's a life lesson in there too. One of the biggest benefits for me in doing really hard stuff in the gym in a somewhat controlled environment is that it makes it really easy to navigate hard stuff that happens in an uncontrollable environment over the course of the day. Your mental fortitude is stronger. Physically, you can withstand. You've built tolerances to life's intolerances. You're going to sprain your ankle. Your body is going to form cancer cells. You're going to encounter pathogens. All of these things are going to happen over the course of your life. The question is whether they will take you down or make you sick or take over your body. And yes, there's genetic component involved, but the way to give yourself a better chance to fight it and to navigate all of life's intolerances is to do really hard things. And what you'll find when you do that is that regularly hard things start to feel much easier. And I think that these classes are a very good metaphor for that. Anything to add? Should we move on?
Move on. I got nothing for that. That explains itself.
Number 5. Community is everything. Community is everything. I don't think that I would still want to be going back there after these 3 months or be as sure as it if it wasn't for the other people who go with a 9 a.m. class, Monday to Friday. I usually go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. It's not the exact same people there every single time, but basically it's the same people there every single time. And when you work really hard alongside somebody, there's a closeness there. It's really, really special. I don't have good words for it, but it's just
a healthier
really, really
version
special
of trauma
feeling.
bonding.
What does that mean?
So like when someone goes through something really terrible, or together or separately, but they can understand it, and nobody can get this except for this person because they've gone through it. It creates this really kind of special bond. And they recommend, not the trauma part, but like in relationships, right? Like when you do something very difficult together, it strengthens your relationship. So the same thing is true here. But to me, it's a healthier form of trauma bonding.
Interesting. The point that jumped out to me when you said that is nobody else can really understand what you're going through. And I mean, Allison can, so Allison comes once a week. She just can't do more than that with the kids, but she'll work out at home and then she comes once a week. But yeah, I mean, my family thinks I'm batshit crazy, right? They're basically of the opinion, it's like, you're already in shape. What are you going to the gym for? You're done. Like
well, there's an in crowd and an out crowd too. That's another big component to it, is especially because there's so much controversy over it. It just compounds that feeling of you don't get it, so it's just it's interesting.
It immediately builds a tribe, right? It's almost a part of it. One of the things that I'm most jealous of CrossFit for is their insane ability to build community in every single way. First, language, right? You gotta be taught the language.
Yeah.
Like what WOD,
today's workout
RX,
that we did. Workout that we did. The name of it is Nicole.
Right.
When I say that, if I'm guessing that some people listening to this podcast know precisely what that workout is.
Absolutely. The language, the inclusion, the exclusion, it all works for building a really, really tight-knit community. And one thing that I strive to do and sometimes feel like I struggle with in my own business is every single thing that I can think of to build a community, because community will recession-proof, financial-proof your business. Like if you can create community, it takes a lot of things, a lot of difficulty off the table, particularly as a coach who's, coaches who are working individually or one to many or one to a few.
So here's something. So this programs, you think about CrossFit and you think about like CrossFit games and just monsters, right? Like just
love CrossFit games.
They're insane.
So much fun.
The class that I'm at has nobody like that. Like this box isn't that type of person, and there's nothing wrong with it. But Dave said, he's like, yeah, I mean, that person isn't going to be attracted to you. And like, not that we don't want them, but we don't particularly want them, because when you have people who are at that level, it completely changes the dynamic. And one of the ways that he's designed that is he doesn't have open gym. So he only has the classes, right? He doesn't have any open gym time. And that's also a financial decision. He just found that open gym time and people who signed up for open gym memberships basically just used up all the equipment and took all the time away from everybody else and paid way less. But it also doesn't. So like my class has regular people. Like I might be the youngest there, and I'm 37 years old. And it's almost everybody has kids. Most of the kids are like teenager kind of type. There's a flight attendant. There's a mobile sales rep. There's a exotic car salesman. There's, it's just like real people with real jobs from different walks of life coming in and doing this, not shredded young people whose life is to train. This is part of what they do. And so I expect what you said, Amber, is very, very true. And I'll ask some of them when I go back on Thursday, I'll ask some of them about this, which is like, hey, is there anybody else in your life that really understands what you're doing here? Because I think that's such a interesting point. I'm going to move on to number 6. This one kind of goes in line with the self-modulating. And so I'm going to read the whole thing. And then I think this is actually important to talk about, not just for CrossFit, but for like any exercise that anybody's doing. So I found that I had to be really careful choosing cardio equipment for the high intensity stuff. The default is always the assault bike, but I'm sitting all day. And so cranking cardio in that position seems ill-advised. And so I always opt to use the ski erg. And I think it's a fantastic tool for people who sit all day to get cardio and oppose that sitting position. If you think about it, we're basically always in flexion, spine flexion. And what happens a lot of the time is that people who are in spine flexion, their back hurts because they're always in spine flexion because they sit all day, but they want to get cardio, and so they're on the bike because it's low impact. The problem is the bike also puts them in spine flexion. And so, yeah, the cardio benefit is great, but it actually exacerbates the problem. And I mean, I don't pretend to be too much of an expert on this. It's something I dealt with a lot when I was training. But there's an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast where Eric Cressy was on, came out a couple of weeks ago. And he goes into a lot of detail on this type of thing. And he actually talks about how with his athletes, they're a very unique population where they're the opposite. They're actually always in extension, which is like completely weird for general pop. But they're always an extension. And so he actually needs to put them in flexion. And so I only say this, I say this because I think it's important in terms of the programming, but I also say this because when you're in programs like this that are group programs, it's very easy to fall into a default. And I mean, it's kind of like, it's like the CrossFit pitcher is like the shredded person on an assault bike, cranking back and forth. I've had to be very careful for those types of workouts to not choose the assault bike. Either the rower, although I prefer not to sit, so I generally don't use the rower, but I think the rower is a good option too. But I think the ski erg is fantastic. I mean, how often do you really do upper body cardio like that? And also, like, if you want nice looking arms, I mean, I like do like 1,000 tricep extensions basically on that thing. I mean, not if you do it properly, but I'm not doing it properly. So it'll shred up your arms and shoulders, man, like nobody's business. And you get the cardio benefit. So I just that was something that popped to my mind of like something that I naturally started to do that I think is important for anybody programming anything, to consider for cardio is, yeah, low impact for sure, but low impact doesn't necessarily have to mean a bike. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with biking. But if your back hurts because you're in flexion and you've been sitting in flexion for the last 30 years, all day, every day of your life, it's probably a good idea to get out of that for your cardio. Anything there?
It's pretty solid. Getting people out of restrictive and consistent movement patterns that have been settled in due to habitual ways of life. That's the magic of exercise, really. Like,
Right.
You just don't want to reinforce things that have already been overdone.
Right. And so you're never going to be able to match it with time.
Right.
You're never, if I'm sitting at a desk for 7 hours in a day and I'm going to the gym for an hour and I'm doing high intensity cardio for 12 minutes of that hour, which is a hell of a long time to be doing high intensity cardio.
It's a very long time.
It's still 12 minutes versus whatever 7 times 60 is. I don't do public math. And so it's a tiny percentage. I'm not going to tell you what the percentage is, but it's a tiny percentage of the total time that you're doing that thing. But you're doing it at such a higher intensity that it can make up for it. Okay, last one, 7. The routine. I think the routine is so important. I think workouts can't be something you think about doing or not doing on any given day. I think that's a recipe for disaster. Even somebody like me who, I'm 37. I've been going to the gym more or less every single week, multiple times a week since I was 15. That's 22 years. Still, if it is not part of my routine, I question whether I should be going. I'm not as consistent. And it feels like it takes a lot more energy to get there. The hardest weight in the gym is the door.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't anything that you lift. And the way to decrease the weight is to make it a routine to get there. And so the class is at 9 o'clock. I drop Calvin off at school at 8:30 on our bikes, and I continue on my bike ride straight to the gym. If you are able to build and link it onto an existing habit, having a set time to train can be a really valuable constraint.
Mm-hmm.
And so while a set time for a class, it starts at 9, whether you're there or you're not there, the plane's taken off, it can feel restrictive. But if you're able to figure out a way to make that work with the natural paths and the natural movement of your everyday, it can be a very valuable constraint. I'm actually worried, Calvin's school ends June 30th, which means that my morning routine is going to change, and he's going to be in a different summer camp every week of the summer. Not every week. We have some weeks where he's not in the summer camp, but they're in different places, and they have slightly different starting times. I'm actually nervous because I know my routine's going to be different and how that's going to match up. So I like the idea. This isn't necessarily strictly a CrossFit thing, but I like the idea of having a strict time to train, even though it feels restrictive, as long as you can set it with your life. Because you can't think about doing it or not doing it. It needs to just be something that's clipped on to something else that you are doing anyway. If you guys talk about James Clear and Atomic Habits, I'm going to lose my fucking shit. Don't do it.
Nobody even had that look, John.
We know that he branded this idea well. We also know that he isn't the one who came out with it. It was Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg. He's the guy who did all the research. James Clear did the Malcolm Gladwell thing and communicated it well. They're both just as valuable. They're just as important. I like James Clear. He's really, really good. But this stuff
That's
didn't
not where my
originate
brain
with him.
was.
That was. I could see in your face.
No, I was thinking.
I love
my
the guy.
brain doesn't
I just
work
hate him
that
because he
way.
sold so many multiples of books than me.
Here we go.
Yeah, I know.
God, he sold so many books. It's pure jealousy. Pure jealousy. There's nothing else to it than that. I think his work is phenomenal. I think he's the nicest guy in the world. I think he's brilliant. I think he deserves all the success in the world. He put in so much work over so many years the right way. So it's pure jealousy.
Did I ever tell you that I tried to reach out to him to annoy you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good. Just making sure.
I know.
Yeah. So we have two things we still need to do. So we have an option. We can either do them separately or we can ask Ren to do them together. So one, we still need to talk about Unbound, and two, we need a slow jam from Ren. So he could either do a slow jam about Dave and then John needs to talk about Unbound, or Ren can do a slow jam about Unbound.
Well, we'll keep the. Oh, do you want to do a slow jam about Unbound? That'd be good.
That's what I was thinking for the ad.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk about Dave.
Ren's gonna do it. Ren's gonna do about Dave. I'll finish up the CrossFit conversation really, really quick, and then I'll talk about my favorite clothing company, and then when you can talk about this man you've never met that you're gonna sing a love song to.
Oh my gosh!
So, like I said at the beginning, I'm gonna continue on with CrossFit for a while. I let my membership renew for another 3 months. It's been fun. I love the people, and the results have been good. Physique wise, if I was doing like a strict bodybuilding routine, I've done a bunch of those in the past. I'm not finding it as good as I've felt like the bodybuilding type training has made me look, but it's a different kind of physique. Mm-hmm. This is like guys muscle stuff. But the bodybuilding training definitely was more, I felt like my arms were bigger. I felt like there was absolutely more hypertrophy, but I feel like there's more density, there's absolutely more strength, and there's much more balance in my overall physique than there's been in the past. Because a lot of the movements are full body movements. Like there's no, I think we did bicep curls once as like an optional finisher. And so things like hamstrings, adductors, like those types of muscles were, if I train them in a bodybuilding style routine, I do, 3 sets of however many reps. Well, now they're being cranked with various types of full body lifts. And so I can feel that those are much stronger. I feel it, but I also can like physically feel it as well. So physique wise, it's different than bodybuilding training for sure. I'm not sure if I look better or worse, but it's definitely quite different. So it's a matter of the goals. What I will say is that right now, and this is a combination of stuff, I've been really consistent for the last couple years with fitness over a variety of routines, much more than I was in my early 30s. But I do feel stronger, healthier, more fit, and I'm never in pain. And I'm 37 and I feel stronger and more fit than I ever have. Clothing. You can see right now that I'm wearing this beautiful long sleeve crew neck shirt. No, all jokes aside, I love this company, Unbound Merino. They have now sponsored the podcast. I was buying their clothing 6 years ago. This is not a new thing. It's merino wool, which is like the best fabric in the world. I've been wearing merino wool for over a decade. Moisture wicking, sits on your body really, really well. And the nice thing about it is it always looks good. Like you can like fold it up and stuff like that, and it doesn't look like gross. But more than anything else, merino wool used to be only in like really ugly travel gear. And what Unbound Merino did is they made it look good as well, and it also has all the benefits of merino wool. So, their t-shirts are what I started with. I call it my one shirt. It's the only t-shirt that I wear, but they've got a full line of clothing now. And most days I'm decked out. Like I wear their socks, I wear their underwear, I wear their athletic wear, I wear their t-shirts, long sleeve shirt. And I love the company. So Unbound Merino, there's a link in our bio, and then use coupon code Goodman. You get 10% off your first order. And I really love it. Nice of them to sponsor the podcast, but I was talking about them a long time before they started sponsoring the podcast as well. Len, talk to me about Dave.
Shout out to you, Dave. You moderately tall, creamy glass of iced milk. Dave goes for the AMRAP, and that means as many reps as possible. I think you dig what I'm saying, ladies. He'll clean that snatch and put his wad in your box, baby. Dave does it all. If you want the straight bar, that's all Dave has got for you, baby. Straight bar. Do your thing, Dave. Keep the box hot, baby. We love you.
I'm going to take this out so you can send this to Dave.
I would recommend another episode for you to listen to normally, but I'm not going to because I don't think that there's any chance you're going to continue listening to the podcast. So I wish you a good day and a happy life, because this is probably the end of our time together. And you take care of yourself. Stay classy.
But